Detachment is not disconnection, it is elevation. When God begins to prepare a person for a new realm of favor, He first adjusts the inner atmosphere of the heart. Many people think that when they start feeling distant from certain emotions, certain relationships, certain pressures, it means something is wrong with them. They assume the silence means loss, the calm means emptiness, or the shift means instability. But in truth, this is often the first indicator that heaven is working silently, lifting the spirit to a higher altitude where divine clarity becomes possible. God rarely elevates a PBR person without first separating their heart from what once drained, distracted, or defined them. Emotional and spiritual detachment is not proof that you are losing passion or direction. It is evidence that the weight of old seasons can no longer hold you where you used to be. There are moments when GBROD becomes your greatest defender, not by adding something new into your life, but by subtracting the unnecessary burdens your heart was never meant to carry. When you begin to rise, you rise because God loosens the grip of your old fears, your old anxieties, your old battles. At first, it feels unfamiliar because you are no longer tethered to the frustrations or emotions that once shaped your reactions. You notice that you do not respond as quickly to negativity. You find yourself uninterested in arguments that once consumed you. You feel a quiet lifting of your mind, a new clarity that you cannot explain, a stillness that is not humanly produced. This is the altitude of elevation, the space where God separates you from the emotional fog so you can see your next step without interference. People often misunderstand this season because it does not come with noise, excitement, or obvious cyber-GNS. It comes with space. It comes with silence. It comes with a spiritual lightness that feels almost like you are observing your life from above rather than being tangled inside it. But this is not you becoming distant. It is you stepping into a higher dimension of spiritual awareness. When an Igbar is ready to soar higher, it does not flap harder. It simply catches a stronger wind. In the same way, God brings a shift in your spirit where you are carried upward by His grace rather than your own striving. Detachment becomes the evidence that certain emotional battles have expired. Not because you avoided them, but because you overcame them. The enemy cannot manipulate a heart that no longer clings to the wounds of the past. The world cannot distract a mind that has been trained to rise above what once controlled it. When God elevates you, He frees you from needing validation from people who never understood your calling. He frees you from carrying the weight of expectations that were never meant for your shoulders. He frees you from staying emotionally connected to environments that would suffocate the next version of your purpose. And the proof of that freedom is detachment and OT Kobar eldness, not apathy, but spiritual elevation. This elevation gives you a new kind of vision. You begin to discern what is for you and what is against you without analyzing or overthinking. You begin to sense the difference between what is temporary and what is divine. You stop feeding battles that cannot follow you into the next season. You stop investing energy into situations that no longer align with your destiny. You begin to feel a holy distance between you and the old version of yourself, a version defined by fear, insecurity, and emotional instability. That version is dissolving because GBROD is forming something stronger, wiser, and more stable inside of you. Detachment is heaven's way of realigning your identity. You stop identifying yourself by your emotions and begin identifying yourself by your purpose. You stop responding to life as someone who is overwhelmed and start responding Berg as someone who is appointed. You realize that the less you cling to things that were never meant to define you, the easier it becomes for God to elevate you into the things that were always waiting for you. The chains that kept you small fall away. The voices that once confused you fade into silent mercy. The fears that once paralyzed you lose their power. You rise not because you forced yourself upward, but because God Himself breathed elevation into your spirit. When detachment enters your life, it is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that God is taking you higher. True strength is revealed when you can walk away from what once controlled you. Many people spend years believing that strength is shown through endurance alone, by holding on, by fighting through, by pushing against the weight of their circumstances. But there is a deeper strength, a more refined strength, a strength, born not from resistance, but from release. It is the strength that rises when you realize certain emotional attachments, certain expectations, and certain battles are not yours to carry anymore. Walking away is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the moment your spirit recognizes that God is calling you into a higher dimension, one where your peace is more important than your pride, where your destiny is more valuable than your comfort, and where your purpose outweighs every emotional chain that once kept you bound. There comes a time in every believer's life when God teaches them that not every fight deserves their energy, not every voice deserves their attention, and not every memory deserves their tears. You do not prove your strength by staying connected to pain. You prove it by releasing what has kept your soul in captivity. Real courage is not demonstrated by clinging to what is familiar, but by trusting God enough to let go. When you release what once controlled you, you declare to heaven, I trust your plan more than I trust my own emotions. That is strength, that is faith, that is spiritual maturity. Walking away is not about abandoning responsibility, it's abandonbar bondage. It is turning your back on the things that drain your spirit, cloud your clarity, and weaken your divine authority. It is refusing to stay tied to situations that keep you small, refusing to participate in conversations that diminish your worth, and refusing to internalize the negative why that others try to place upon you. When you walk away with peace in your spirit, you are telling the enemy, you no longer have access to my emotions. You are telling life, I will not be shaped by temporary storms. And you are telling God, I am ready for what comes next. Every time you chose to detach from what once controlled your reactions, your fears, your decisions, you rise into a new level of freedom. You begin to see that the world is louder than it is wise, and you realize that not every invitation is a divine assignment. There are provocations meant to pull you back into details you've already conquered. But walking away keeps you aligned with victory rather than chaos. The enemy loves to trap people with emotional triggers, hoping they will waste their strength on frustrations and distractions. But when you mature spiritually, those triggers lose their power. What OBRNCE stirred your anger now reveals your growth. What once disturbed your peace now strengthens your discernment. You walk away not because you are defeated, but because you are victorious. There is a special blessing that comes to those who refuse to be ruled by their emotions. When you stop reacting impulsively, you start responding spiritually. When you stop allowing others to manipulate your feelings, you begin to hear God's direction with greater clarity. This is why walking away is so powerful. It creates space for God's voice. The quieter your emotions become, the louder His guidance becomes. Yes, the less you give your heart to battles that do not matter, the more you recognize the battles that truly do. Walking away is not passive. It is strategic. It protects your purpose, preserves your peace, and positions you for God's next instruction. Often people stay attached to the wrong things because they fear what will happen if they let go. But the truth is this: nothing God requires you to release will ever hold your future. If it could secure your destiny, He would allow it to remain. When He leads you to detach, He is redirecting your spirit toward opportunities that carry life, not heaviness, clarity. not confusion growth, not stagnation. Strength is choosing to move forward, even when the past tries to pull you back. Strength is realizing that staying in certain environments would damage your spirit, but walking away will transform it. You may walk away from some people, but you walk toward your peace. You may walk away from old habits, but you walk toward your identity. You may walk away from draining emotions, but you walk toward divine clarity. Walking away is not loss, it is preparation. It is the recognition that your spirit has outgrown what used to keep you. Occupy Bered. What once controlled you no longer defines you, and what once limited you can no longer contain you. True strength is not in holding on. True strength is in rising above what once ruled your hearts, stepping into the freedom God designed for you, and trusting that every step away from bondage is a step toward destiny. God cannot fill hands that are clinging to what He wants you to release. So often people pray for breakthrough while holding tightly to the very things that block the blessing. They ask for new beginnings while remaining emotionally entangled with old chapters. They cry out FBR or God to open doors, yet they grip the handles of doors that He has already closed. But there is a divine principle woven into the fabric of spiritual growth. What you refuse to release becomes the barrier to what God is trying to place in your life. Heaven is generous, overflowing, abundant, but GBROD will not pour fresh oil into a vessel already filled with yesterday's residue. The miracle you are praying for requires room in your mind, room in your spirit, room in your hands. And to create that room, release becomes necessary. Release is not always easy because the human heart forms Bobart ND with familiar patterns and familiar emotions, even if they are painful. Sometimes it is not the situation itself that ties us down, but the emotional attachment to what that situation once meant. Even when the season has expired, the memory tries to keep you anchored. Even when the relationship NBR no longer aligns with God's plan, the comfort of familiarity tries to convince you to stay. Even when the habit drains you, the mind says, at least I know this pain. But God cannot elevate a person who refuses to loosen their grip on the things He is trying to move them away from. He cannot fill HBR hands that insist on carrying the weight of what He has declared finished. There is a divine rhythm to blessing. Something must leave before something greater can enter. You must come to a place where you trust God enough to release what no longer carries His presence. The release may feel like loss abarty first, but in heaven's perspective, it is preparation. God never asked you to let go without having something stronger, deeper, and holier prepared for you. But until you release the lesser, you will not be able to receive the greater. The nature of fullness requires emptiness first. The nature of overflow requires space. The nature of divine promotion requires detachment from what held you at a lower level. Every time God begins to expand your life, He starts with a separation. He begins by removing emotional connections that limit your perspective. He begins by closing internal doors, long BBR, E4 external doors open. He begins by detaching your spirit from relationships that subtract rather than multiply. This internal shift is not punishment, it is protection. God knows the blessings waiting for you require a heart that is not fragmented, a mind that is not cluttered, and a spirit that is not divided. Holding on to the wrong attachments creates spiritual noise, and God will not allow your destiny to be drowned out by distractions. Some of the things you are gripping tightly are not evil, they are simply outdated. They served you once, but they cannot take you into the next season. People who walked with you for a time cannot walk with you into your calling. Some ways of thinking that kept you safe in the past will keep you stuck in the future. Some emotional patterns that felt normal before will feel suffocating as God raises your spiritual level. Release is the signal to heaven that you are ready for transformation. It is the sign that you trust God more than your memories, more than your comfort, more than your fears. When you release, something powerful happens. Your spirit becomes lighter. Your discernment becomes sharper. Your heart becomes quieter, not from MB-Bartiness, but from alignment. You begin to sense God's presence in ways you couldn't see before, because the noise of emotional attachments is no longer interfering. The things that once consumed your thoughts lose their grip. The worries that once exhausted your strength begin to dissolve. You realize, THBR, at the moment you open your hands, God places something there: peace, direction, strength, wisdom, insight. Even before the blessing manifests externally, God begins filling you internally. And as your hands open, so does your future. Release becomes the doorway to restoration. Release becomes the invitation for divine promotion. Release becomes the posture that tells God, I am ready for what you have prepared for me. Nothing you let go of for God will ever leave you empty. Nothing He asks you to release is ever wasted. What you release becomes the seed. What God gives becomes the harvest. SPRO, let your hands open. Let your heart release. Let your spirit rise into a place where nothing weighs you down from receiving the fullness heaven is preparing for you. For the moment you choose to release what is no longer meant for you, God begins to fill your life with what has always been destined BRD for you. When you detach, you do not lose anything. God positions you to receive everything. Human nature often fears detachment because it feels like the unraveling of something familiar. It feels like stepping into a space where your hands are empty, your heart is quieter, and your surroundings, SPR, aim to shift without explanation. But in the realm of the Spirit, detachment is not a sign of decrease. It is a sign that heaven is preparing you for increase. There is a divine paradox woven into God's way of elevating His people. What feels like loss is often the beginning of gain, and what looks like emptiness is often the clearing of space for abundance. The moment God begins to detach you from something, He is simultaneously aligning you with what carries purpose, favor, and spiritual weight. Many people misinterpret the season of detachment because it does not always come with visible BLBR essings. It comes with an internal shift. First, a deep sense that your spirit is moving beyond what your life has not yet caught up with. You begin sensing that certain conversations no longer feed you. Certain environments no longer inspire you. Certain relationships no longer grow you. It is not THBR. These things are wrong. It is simply that your spirit has outgrown them. Detachment is not rejection. It is redirection. Heaven is pulling you forward into a season you cannot enter while holding the weight of previous ones. And though your emotions may not fully understand it, your spirit knows exactly what God is doing. There is a sacred preparation hidden inside detachment. When God is ready to overflow His favor, He removes anything that would prevent you from receiving it fully. Some things cannot stay because they cannot survive the elevation God is bringing you into. Some attitudes not remain because they would distort the blessing. Some connections cannot continue because they would drain what God is about to pour. Detachment becomes God's way of protecting the blessing before it arrives, securing the vessel before it is filled, and preparing your heart to handle abundance without being overwhelmed by it. People often see detachment as something being taken from them, but in truth, something is being made available to them. God never detaches you without replacing what was lost with something more aligned with your destiny. You may lose the familiarity of the past, but you gain the clarity of the future. You may lose certain relationships, but you gain divine appointments. You may lose the comforts of previous seasons, but you gain spiritual authority, deeper insight, and a renewed sense of identity. Nothing surrendered to God ever leaves you empty. He multiplies you give up and transforms it into something better suited for your purpose. When you detach emotionally, you reclaim your power. You stop allowing circumstances to dictate your peace. You stop depending on people for validation that only God can give. You stop letting old memories define your IBR identity. This is not isolation, it is transformation. It is God strengthening the foundation of your heart, so that when the weight of blessing comes, you can carry it without collapsing. It is Him turning your attention away from what drains you, so He can focus your spirit on what elevates you. There is a supernatural confidence that rises in someone who has embraced godly detachment. They no longer fear what is leaving their life because they trust the one who is guiding their steps. They no longer cling to what is familiar because they sense the nearness of something greater. They walk with Kabar ayat assurance, not because they have everything figured out, but because they know God is orchestrating the details with precision and love. Detachment creates this confidence. It allows faith to take the place of fear and surrender to take the place of anxiety. And when the timing of God aligns with the preparation inside of you, what once felt like loss suddenly reveals itself as strategy. You begin to see why He removed certain people from your path. You begin to understand why certain opportunities collapsed. You begin to recognize that the detours were not setbacks, they were protection. The unanswered prayers were not rejection, they were redirection. Everything you released became the soil for something greater to be planted. Then, without warning, the overflow arrives. Not a slow drip, not a hesitant blessing, but a sudden, undeniable outpouring of favor that could only come from Hivba'en. The relationships you lost are replaced with divine connections. The opportunities that slipped away make room for greater ones. The peace you once lacked begins to anchor your entire life. What you thought was the end becomes the foundation of a new beginning. And you realize that detachment, whereas never about losing it, was God positioning you to receive everything He had prepared for you long before you even knew to ask. Detachment is not stepping away from life. It is stepping into destiny. And the moment you embrace it, you open the door to everything God has been waiting to release. In TBR, He end. Everything God has been doing in your heart, every moment of detachment, every quiet shift, every release of emotional weight, has been preparing you for a season you have never experienced before. Nothing in your journey has been random. Nothing has been wasted. The calm you felt was not empty bar-iness. It was alignment. The distance you sensed was not loss. It was elevation. The things that fell away were not setbacks. They were divine removals so your hands could finally hold what heaven was about to place in them. Every internal change, every spiritual adjustment, every silent transformative ion has been heaven's way of shaping you for the overflow. You are not the same person you were. You have risen above battles that once defeated you. You have matured beyond emotions that once controlled you. You have walked away from burdens that once drained you. And now your spirit stands ready, clear, steady, open, and expectant. This is the posture of someone God can trust with blessing. This is the heart of someone prepared to walk into destiny with confidence, authority, and peace. What God is bringing into your life will not require striving, chasing, or proving. It will come because you are aligned. It will come because your spirit is surrendered. It will come because you chose faith over fear, release over resistance, wisdom over attachment, and purpose over comfort. You have passed the internal test. And now heaven releases the external reward. Get ready for sudden elevation. Get ready for unexpected favor. Get ready for doors you didn't knock on to open. For connections you didn't search for to appear. For opportunities beyond your imagination to find you. You are stepping into a season where God will show you why He detached you, why He separated you, why He lifted you above what once held you down. You are stepping into a chapter where everything aligns, everything accelerates, and everything begins to make sense. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of the part God has been preparing you for all along. Walk forward with a steady heart, an open spirit, and a confident faith. The detachment was the sign. The elevation was the process. The overflow is the promise. And now that promise is coming to pass. Everything is about to change, and it will change in your favor.